Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio. Welcome to another tutorial, which today is going to be just a little bit more challenging. It was a challenge for me because I haven't done this in a little while, and that's curved piecing for the Drunkard's Path. And this was the little sort of table topper or wall quilt, small mini quilt that I made using Drunkard's Path. And as I said, it was a little bit of a challenge. It took me 2 or 3 blocks before I got back into the swing of it, and then sort of the light bulb came on and the penny dropped. And away I went really, and after that it was quite easy. So don't be intimidated by curved piecing. There is a couple of tips and tricks that I sort of learnt on the way of making this one. I think the last time I did curved piecing it was a much larger block, so it was a little bit easier, but this isn't too bad. Now the template I've used is one I just found in my drawer where I keep all my templates and rulers, and it was a free one that came on a magazine. Now we're UK based, so it was a sort of UK distributed magazine. I don't know if they get distributed in other countries. I suspect they probably do, but it was just a free one on a magazine. So have a look through your drawers, because you may have something, and cupboards, you may have something stashed away that's similar that you can use, and there are lots of different manufacturers that make the Drunkard's Path templates. So I'm just going to set this to one side for a minute and talk a little bit about the fabrics. And the fabric range I used, it was a charm pack, and it's called Greys. And what I was looking for was something that had 4 colours, because I wanted the 4 coloured sections on here. So this was the little charm pack I used, and you can see there it's got the beautiful reds and greens and blues and this sort of mustardy yellow. And if I just show you on the jelly roll, you might be able to see those fabrics, those colours, just a little bit better. I didn't use the whites in this, or the lights, but what I will show you is on the back, I did actually use them on the back. I put together, used some of the leftover charm squares to piece together the backing for it. So it was using up as much of the charm pack as I could, and I quite often like to do that, so we're not breaking into new fabric. The only fabric I grabbed from my stash was this green for the binding. Like I say, that was just a couple of strips of fabric I had in my stash that I could use. So let me just put those to one side. Let me just put them over here. So you can see these were just the squares I had left, mostly greens. I think that's because I didn't use a green on the back anywhere. So I'm going to demonstrate. Now this is a white that came out of the charm pack. Now I didn't use the lights, as I said in here, and I'll show you for why. So let me just look at the 2 parts to the template. Let me put them in under the close-up. So you've got two bits, and see if I've got a trusted piece of paper so that you can see this a little bit more clearly. So those are the 2 bits on the of the template, and you've got the bit that I call the pie and the bit that I call the wedge. Now I don't know if they're the official titles for those 2 pieces, but that's what I call them, so I know which ones I'm working at. Now these easily fit on the 5-inch square. Now this template says it's for a finished size of a 4.5-inch square, and that's what I did trim mine down to. So you can see there that bit easily fits on. Let me just move that piece of paper out of the way now, because it will become distracting. Now this bit does fit on a 5-inch square, but you would only get one. There wouldn't be enough space here to get a second cut out of that one. So what I chose to do instead, rather than using up lots of 5-inch squares, is I thought it would be a more efficient way of cutting if I used a strip. So I cut 5-inch strips from a white background because I found that, like I say, it was just a little bit more efficient cutting. So let's just cut those white ones first. So you can see there, if I just put it under the close-up, you can see how well that fits on. Now I worked out to get 2, you actually need a piece of fabric that's 5 by 5.5, and you'll actually get 2 cuts out of that. So I'm just going to line that up there. Now you have to be a little bit careful. There's no sort of non-slip or anything on this, so I did find the ruler did tend to move about a little bit. But what I did when I was cutting it, I used one of my fingers to act as a buffer on the side of the ruler there, and that helped keep the ruler in place as I was cutting. So we're just going to cut up there. Move that out of the way a little bit and just go gently. And if you find this is easier with a smaller rotary cutter, the 28mm, you might want to do that. But you can see that because I held on there a little bit, it helped stop that moving. So once I'd made that curved cut, I could then just turn the piece around. And really good place if you've got a rotating cutting mat. I'm just going to line that back up. and make the straight cut. And there's our first piece. Now I'll just cut the second piece and I'll do it over here. Now I found that if you just sort of scoot the ruler along, or the template, it's not a ruler, it doesn't measure anything. And I'm just being careful here because I've got a little bit that I've cut from the first one. And I'm going to cut. Like I say, rotating cutting mat, or even just a smaller cutting mat, and you can rotate the whole thing, but it's easy enough. And this is the bit that tends to move a bit more. So like I say, I'm just using my fingers there as a buffer to stop the ruler sliding too much, and just be very careful because I'm quite close to my fingers there. But you can see that's the two pieces that I got out of the 5.5 inch square. And that's a little bit of waste for now, but I'll come up with something to do with that. I may turn that into a strip and put it into my string blocks. So certainly 5.5 inch strips, 5 inch, 5.5 inch rectangles, so strips work much better than the 5 inch squares for cutting the wedge shapes. So we've got two cut there. Now I'm just going to demonstrate with one. And I had a piece of, it's there already. Try and keep myself tidy. And we can cut the second part of the template, which is this one. So I'm just going to lay that. It's a bit green on green, not the best colour to choose. Now I'm just ignoring the pinked edges. You see there's plenty on there, but there isn't enough on that 5 inch square. Let me just demo this while I'm, to get your second piece out of. It's slightly too small. So once again, that moved a little bit, but that's okay because I can do a clean-up cut. So I've cut my curve first, and then I go back in and I cut my straight sides. I'm literally just taking off tiny little bits, excuse me, tiny little bits for that one. And that's the little bit of waste we've got for that. But if I'm honest, I would probably use that either for my string blocks, or I could probably get a nice hexagon out of that for my English paper piecing. So nothing goes to waste. So there's our two pieces for the Drunkards Path unit or block. That is a whole block. So let me just lay all of that to one side for the minute. Trying to keep myself a bit organised so I don't get scruffy around the edges, as you guys know I call it. So to put this together, I find the centre by folding that in half, just finger pressing that, so I've got a line there. I'm doing the same with this one. I'm just going to press. Now, when I was making these blocks, I tried different methods. I tried it with the wedge shape on top. I tried it with the pie shape on top. I found I had more success with this wedge shape on top, so I'm going to do that. I also tried different techniques. I tried sewing that whole curve without pins. I tried it with 3 pins, but I found, for me, the best result I got, and everybody will definitely be shocked because they know how little I pin, is I pinned. So I'm going to do this under the close-up so hopefully you can see. So I start in the centre. I've matched up those 2 points. And then we're going to match up the edges there. And I'm going to put a pin in. Now you may find you just need to pin the first few, and then after a while you get your eye in and you can do it. But I found there was less reversing, less ripping if I pinned. So actually let's put the pin that way. So I've pinned to begin with at the beginning, the end and the middle, starting in the middle. Now some people just sew it with that, but I found actually that I got a better result if I also pinned in the middle here. And when I was doing this, it reminded me of fitting in sleeves. You have to sort of ease that curve in. I don't dressmake, but I have a friend who dressmakes, and it definitely reminded me of fitting in a sleeve. So you can sort of see there, all that edge lines up nicely. So I can just make sure that those 2 pieces fit really well. So I've gone quiet now, concentrating on pinning. It's because I don't do it very often. I have to think about it, right. These are nice pins actually, they're really nice and fine. I need to get some of those. So there's the bit or pin. Now some people find that the pins get in the way, but I found it helpful. So we've got it there all pinned, and you can see it's sort of fitting quite nicely. I'm just going to move that pin out of the way a little bit. I've got my little starter scrap, and my machine is set up to do 1/4 inch. But we are going to trim these. These are slightly oversized. Just making sure. I'm just going to take a couple of stitches, and then I can take that first pin out. And just go gently. Just go slowly, take your time. And I can see I've just got a little bit of a ripple there, so I'm just going to flatten that fabric out a little bit. And I'm just keeping the edge of the foot on that curve. And just concentrating on just keeping the fabric nice and flat. And as I said, once you do a few of these blocks, you get into the swing of it a bit more. And it goes together quite quickly. Now don't worry that that's a little bit bunched there. That's not, you're just concentrating on keeping this bit flat here where you're actually sewing. And I'm just going to lift the foot again there. It's these narrow pieces that tend to sort of crumple up a little bit, so I'm just flattening that out again. Taking that pin out. I can get as close to that last pin as I can. Actually, I'm just going to get my seam ripper and use it just to help hold that fabric. It's easier than trying to get your finger in under there. And there we are, there's that whole seam sewn. So now we need to take it to the iron. Okay, so there's our seam, that's how it's looking from the front. That's how it's looking from the back. Now I tended to press towards the piece of pie, but they will press either way. And then I just worked out which way the seam needed to go when I came to put the whole thing together. But you can see there, it's actually lying really nice and flat. So they go in pretty well, so it's not quite as intimidating. And let me just put it under the close-up there so you can see it. Now you can see there, you can never sew these really, really straight, which is why we always sort of do it and then trim them down. And I'm going to just trim that back to 4.5 inches. Now the thing that I watched was these seam allowances here. Let me just show you under the close-up. So this bit here and this bit here, I made sure I had 1/2 inch between that and my outside fabric. And they're my two measurements. Actually, I don't know if that's all going to fit under the close-up. Let's just turn this ruler around. So 4.5 inches. So I'm looking for my 1/2 inch mark there and my 1/2 inch mark there. And if I make sure I've got that there and that there, then all of these blocks should come out the same. So I want to trim, move the ruler. Let's just reposition again. 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. That's it. So there was very little to come off that top piece. And then once you've got those two sides, I can put let's actually put it right in the centre so you can see I've got my 4.5 there. And now I can trim these other two sides. So that's all that comes off from the block, but you get this really nice and perfect Drunkards path unit. Put that in the bin. So that's what we do with those for trimming them up. And then all I did was I made 16. So I did 4 in the green. Let me just bring this one back in. 4 in the green, 4 in the blue, 4 in the red, and 4 in the mustard yellow. There's lots of different arrangements for Drunkard's Path, but I particularly like this one, where you sort of have these nice sort of petal shapes. Now I could have chosen, and it would have been a little bit less piecing, to put a solid square in there, and that really fills in the petal shape a lot more. But I sort of like this with sort of the floating effect. And to create that floating effect, I didn't want the binding to come right up to the edge. So I just put some little 1.5 inch strips all the way around it, quilted it, and I actually quilted it on my embroidery machine. I've been trying to practice a bit more. I don't do large quilts on it because it's a bit of a battle, sort of getting it into the hoop all the time and lining it up and rehooping. But this is sort of the perfect size thing for me to sort of practice that out. But I do just want to very quickly draw your attention, and I'm actually going to put that under the close-up, to the thread I've used, because actually from a distance it looks white, but the colour I actually used was this very pale blue, which blended in. And if I just get the white thread here, I don't know how well the camera's going to pick it up, but I felt that the white was sort of a little bit too glary, but the blue just sunk into the quilt a little bit more. It just wasn't quite so obvious. And I always want my quilting to be like the supporting act, really, in the project, because we've done a lot of work with our very nice piecing, so we want to be able to see that. So I chose a pale blue. And I need to give credit to Angela Walters from Quilting as My Therapy from that many years ago. I was watching one of her videos where she was talking about quilting, and she was saying she often uses a pale colour thread, so either a pale pink, a pale green, a pale blue, or a pale yellow, and that sometimes works better than white. So I tried it out on that, and it absolutely just blended in and looked lovely. I don't know what this quilting pattern was called. I think it's something like textured feathers or something. It's a feather design. So that's all I wanted to show you. And as I said, I just used the leftover 5-inch squares, and I kept them at 5 inches. They were more or less worked out to the size I needed to match the front. And then I just added a bit of this green that I had in my stash, which matched the green on the front. And just one final thing I want to mention is actually how I put these together. So you can see sort of that was the unit. And I actually did these in blocks of 4. So I actually made each petal shape. And each petal shape you make exactly the same. So if we just put this here, so you can see that piece goes there. The 2 outside pieces face out. And then the 2 middle pieces face towards each other. And you make each set of 4 exactly the same. Just sew it together like a 4 patch. And then put those together in a block of 4. So it's a really quick and simple block to do. And once I'd got my brain back into the curved piecing, I had a lot of fun making it. So I hope you give this a try. If you do, please feel free to share your photos with us. We love to see what you do with some of these ideas. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you'll see us again here next time in the sewing studio.